Okay, a real quick public service announcement before we get into today's video. If you look right down here in front, you'll see that little black box down there that has two of our channel stickers on it there. It has the YouTube sticker that you're familiar with if you're watching on YouTube, and it has the Fed Up J. Lewis sticker from Rumble on that side. I have a few of those stickers laying around. A few of you have expressed that you'd like to have one in the past. Let me explain to you how this works. I have the stickers. I would like to give you one. I would like to give you one of each if you want it. If you ask me for a couple, by all means, I'll give you a couple of them. I cannot send you a sticker if I don't know where to send it to. So if you comment down below in the comment section on the video and say that you want one, I will send you my email address so that you can send me your address so that I can send you a sticker. No strings attached. Don't put your mailing address in the comment section of the video, because then everybody can see it. And if you don't give me your address to send the sticker, I can't send you a sticker. So hopefully that makes sense. Hey there, folks. How you doing today? Welcome back to the channel. Please bear with any background racket that you might hear throughout this production. We are on location where life happens, and sometimes there's stuff going on out there that can be heard in here. Back out here today with our Ruger M77 Hawkeye guide gun chambered in 30-06. We did the initial video on this rifle about a week ago. That's the thumbnail for it. Overwhelming response from you people on this one. I was really kind of surprised how much interest there was in this particular rifle. Now, keep in mind, even though the video came out last week, the range footage that we were using and the data that we had collected on it was several months old. Keep that in mind. We're back out here today, and we're going to be addressing some of the many responses that we got to this. Now, this is not the viewer feedback video. I will be doing a separate video on viewer feedback due to the overwhelming response from you people. There were some really good comments and suggestions made in the comment section. I cannot address them all in a video form such as this and do any of them justice, but suffice it to say, there's a problem with this rifle with accuracy. We need to get to the bottom of it, but real data is repeatable and verifiable, so we're going to start with that. We're just going to touch on a couple of key points moving into it. Some of the simple stuff, you know, sometimes the easy stuff, sometimes the simple stuff is the best stuff to try to fix. I'm certainly not above screwing up or making a mistake, so I wanted to give as much fairness as I could to the package that you see here, and then explain to you some of the stuff that we're going to be doing going forward. For starters, there was a lot of comment about, is it a good scope? There was a lot of comment about, are the rings aligned properly? There was a lot of comment about, are all of the screws torqued to spec? There was a lot of comment about action screws being torqued to spec for this particular platform. So, in the interest of fairness, before I took it back to the range the second time, I took the scope off, I took the rings off, I took the rifle out of the stock, I examined the stock, I put the rifle back in the stock, torqued all of the screws to spec. More on that later. Also, I put the rings back on, torqued them to spec. I inspected the scope to see if there was any indication of like bite marks on it from the rings, you know, where maybe something was getting torqued or bent funny. Didn't see any of that. The scope moved freely in the rings. So I don't think that is the issue. But regardless, all of this was taken off and put back on and torqued back down to spec so that we could rule any and all of that out of the equation. Now, on that note, we had the factory muzzle brake installed for the first range session. I actually took the muzzle brake off and put it back on just to make sure that it also was torqued to spec. But other than checking our prior work and readjusting all of our screws to make sure that everything was where it was supposed to be, we didn't make any changes to the platform between range session 1 and range session 2. Now, as I mentioned before, verifying data. This video is actually going to be a little bit tedious because I'm going to be going over some of the stuff that we had from the loads. There's actually going to be about a 5-minute segment in here, so you can see the manner in which I was recording the data. Suffice it to say, I was given 2 minutes in between shots. I was giving 5 minutes in between groups. I was taking temperature readings and I recorded all of the data, including mapping the location of impacts. Quite time consuming getting all this data collected for you, but in the interest of fairness to what we're working with, I felt it was relevant that we do so. Now, speaking of data collection, all of the data that was collected on range session number 1, which was filmed many months ago, consisted of shots fired with the factory muzzle brake in place. Now, I had mentioned in the first video, which if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to watch it because it is relevant to what we're covering here. I'm going to brush on it a little bit, but I'm not going to rehash everything that was in that video. Otherwise, this one would just go too long. But suffice it to say, in the first video, I had mentioned that 150 grain Remington Corlocks was the ammunition that I had initially sighted the rifle in with. That was what I chose to sight it in with this time as well. Because the scope and the rings and everything was off, I wanted to re-sight in the rifle before we moved forward. Surprisingly enough, I only had to make about a 1 minute of angle adjustment to get it right back where it was the time before. So we can say that the rifle is still sighted in with the Remington Corlock 150s. On day number 1, the very best group that we were able to achieve from this rifle was 1.14 inches with Federal PowerShock 150 ammunition. Not a particularly good group, but it was about half the size of most of the groups that we got from the rifle that day. Most of them were over 2 inches. We had one that went 3 inches. I'm going to say that about 2.25 MOA was the median group for the first range session with this rifle, with the muzzle brake installed. So moving forward, when I took it back to the range yesterday, the initial sight-in work that I did for it with the 150 grain Remington Corlocks was also with the muzzle brake installed. Once I had the sight-in completed, I fired 2 groups with the 150 grain Remington Corlocks with the muzzle brake installed. One of them was the best yet so far at 1.04 inches, which, if you know what minute of angle actually is, that is just about exactly 1 minute of angle. So I was really excited to see that, and I said, holy smokes, maybe there was something to taking it apart and retorquing all the screws. Well, calm down now. I fired a second group with the same ammunition, and it came in at 1.93, which was just better than the average from the time before. So now I was scratching my head, so I moved on to, let's see, where is it there? The Monarch 150 grain, which is actually, that's a Privy Partisan. It's PPU ammo from Serbia. I've got a couple of rifles that really like that ammunition. This is not one of them. I fired a group with that, which came in at, I believe it was 1.57 with the muzzle brake installed, which also was slightly better than the median average from the other ammunition, but it was not a good group. More on that one later. I also fired a group with the Hornady Precision Hunter 178 grain ELDX with the muzzle brake installed. On the prior occasion, our groups with that ammunition out of this rifle were 2-inch groups. No disappointment, they were still 2-inch groups with the muzzle brake installed on day 2. So suffice it to say, while there were a couple of groups that came in ever so slightly smaller than they were on the first day, the average of groups fired with the muzzle brake on day 2 was pretty consistent with what we saw the first time. So I'm going to say that retorquing all of the screws did not make a significant change. So moving forward, if you recall from the first video, this rifle actually comes with a barrel weight. I'll throw up a picture of that so you can see it. I don't have it here on the bench with me today, but it comes with a barrel weight that Ruger says is tuned to match the muzzle brake if you want to hunt without the brake installed. So I have heard from a couple of people throughout all of the correspondence that I've had on this rifle that there can be a significant point of impact shift when switching from the muzzle brake to the muzzle weight. So I was anticipating that. I was actually very surprised that not only did the point of impact stay about the same, the group size stayed about the same with the muzzle brake installed. Bear with me, I've got some data written down here. I'm going to cover this so that I don't misinform you as I go forward. I fired a total of 7 groups with the muzzle weight installed. The most relevant of those was our Federal PowerShock, which on day 1 we got a 1.4 inch group, which was the best group of that day, with the muzzle weight installed came in at 1.84. I fired an additional group and it was about the same, so we're going to consider that to be fairly accurate data. Moving back to the Hornady ELDX, if you recall, with the muzzle brake, we had a 2, I said 2 inches earlier, it was actually 2.1. With the muzzle weight, we had a 2.05. So nearly identical on the group size there. It was literally 0.05 of an inch different, so not enough difference to make a difference. The difference could have just been me. Surprisingly, with our Winchester 150 grain power points, which fired a 2-inch group with the muzzle brake, that one actually tightened up a little bit, and we came in at 1.1 inches with the muzzle weight installed. Everything else that we fired with the muzzle weight installed was more or less the same as it was with the muzzle brake, so I will say that on this particular rifle, the muzzle weight and the muzzle brake do act very similarly, but there are some differences, most notably with the Winchester PowerPoint 150s. It really did tighten up that load. More on that load here in a minute. So after I gathered the data with the muzzle weight installed, I took it off and I installed the thread protector, which is virtually weightless. It's a considerably smaller device than the other two. And most of you in the comment section on video 1 suggested the thread protector and to remove the brake or the weight. Well, we're going to cover that now. Let's see here. So moving forward with our thread protector installed, if you recall from our PPU ammunition, the first group that I fired with the muzzle brake was 1.57 inches. With the muzzle weight, that one was 1.71. So slightly different, but not a whole lot of difference there. That could have just been me. With the thread protector installed, we got a group of 1.58. So while none of those three were particularly good groups, they were all very consistent across the board, whether it was the muzzle brake, the muzzle weight, or the thread protector installed. Don't get too excited. With our Remington Core-Lokt 150s, with our muzzle brake installed, we came in at 1.04, quite literally a 1 minute of angle group. With the muzzle weight installed, that improved slightly to a 0.90. With the thread protector, we shot a 1.63. Now, that was a shift in the opposite direction from what I was anticipating, so I fired an additional group, and it also came in over 1.5 inches. With our Federal Power Shock ammunition, our initial group was 1.4. That was the best of day one, and that was fired with the muzzle brake. Our muzzle weight group was 1.84, so it increased the size a little bit. With the thread protector installed, our best group with the Federal Power Shock was 0.72, so about 3/4 of an inch. I tried to replicate that, and the group that I got was like 1.2 inches, so it is what it is. The thread protector improved some of those. It made some of them a little worse. I don't know what the science is behind that. Now, if you recall from the groups that I mentioned there, the Monarch groups, they were all pretty consistent across the board between whether it was the muzzle brake, the muzzle weight, or the thread protector, but they weren't the most consistent. The most consistent went to the Hornady Precision Hunter ELDX. With the muzzle brake, it was 2.1 inches. With the muzzle weight, it was 2.05. And with the thread protector, it was 2.0 even. So suffice it to say, while the Hornady Precision Hunter ELDX is extremely consistent, it does not fire particularly well through the rifle in its current configuration. Moving on to our Winchester PowerPoint 150s. If you recall, with the muzzle brake installed last time, we got a 2-inch group. Today, with the muzzle brake, that sucked into a 1.1 inch, which was really good. And with the thread protector, it jumped back out to a 1.8. So go figure there. With the Winchester PowerPoint 180s, with our muzzle brake installed, we got a 2-inch group. With the thread protector installed, we got a 2.5-inch group, which was the worst of day 2. And I don't have any data recorded in my book for the muzzle weight, so I believe that was one of the ones that I did not do with the muzzle weight installed. Going over to our Remington Core-Lokt 180s. On day one, the first time we had this rifle out, I got this group, which was a 3-inch group, but you'll notice 2 of them were touching, and that third one, which was actually the second round fired, was a significant jump. So much so that I refired that group and got similar results the first time out. 3-inch group with the muzzle brake installed, with the thread protector installed, I shot a .066 group with this rifle in its current configuration. I tried to replicate that, and there were a couple of flyers, and the rounds that were touching were fired in between the flyers. So that group resulted in one over here, one over here, one over here, one over here, that kind of thing happened there. So there was a little bit of inconsistency there. But that wasn't the best of the day. Let me show you what the best of the day was. If you will recall from our first range session with the Hornady American Hunter 150 grain, we got a 1.9-inch group with the muzzle brake. With the thread protector installed, I got a .60 group out of it. All 3 rounds were touching really good. I was so surprised when I got that. I tried to replicate it, and barring one flyer, I actually improved it and got a .51-inch group with the flyer included, which the flyer was the 3rd round fired. It was a 1.43. So I know what you're probably thinking. You're thinking, well, it sounds like to me you fixed it. It was the muzzle brake. You're getting some pretty good groups now. Hold your horses. Good data is repeatable and verifiable. Of all the ammunition that I got good groups with, I stuck around and I fired repeat groups with it to try to replicate what I had seen the first time out. It really didn't work out that way. The range session, when I had this rifle out at the range for the second time, was over 6 hours long. I was literally out there all day, as I'd mentioned before, allowing 2 minutes to cool in between shots, allowing 5 minutes in between groups, keeping the rifle in the shade in between range sessions. The temperature of the barrel was hovering between about 110 and 118 degrees. The ambient temperature was 105, so keep that in mind. We really never let the rifle get hot for any of those groups. What I discovered on that second range session, although we had some very good groups, we had some groups that were a little rough also. And if you recall from the video I did on the Ruger American Gen 2, we had good groups across the board, and they were repeatable good groups. And that was actually fired on the same day that we took this one out the first time. So I can't say that the rifle is fixed because I'm still getting some really junky groups, and I'm getting some inconsistent. I'll get one group that's really good and another group that's not so good out of the same ammunition, out of the same rifle, out of the same shooter, out of the same setup on the same day. So what are we going to do next? What comes next? Well, for starters, we're going to take that Ruger American Gen 2 that we know shoots properly, and we're going to put this loopholed scope on top of it. I'm going to take it back out to the range, and I'm going to shoot a bunch of groups with various ammunition with this scope to see if I get the same kind of results that I got with the other scope. Could it be that we have a dud on this loopholed scope? It could be. I've had several people in the comment section have indicated that these VX3 scopes are not what they used to be. I have an old VX3 and it works really well, so I may, if I determine that this one is not as consistent on my other rifle, I may swap that scope onto this rifle and take it back out as the next step. But knowing that the scope is one of the variables that we haven't addressed yet on this platform at this point, I think it makes more sense to take this scope and put it on a rifle that we know shoots well rather than try a scope that we know shoots well on this rifle. So we're going to take this one, we're going to put it on a different rifle, and we're going to see if it makes any difference. That is coming up next. There are several other things that we're going to do with this rifle in the very near future. Please stay tuned. It's going to be fun. This is going to be kind of a long and drawn out series because we are really trying to make this rifle the best that we can. A real important note that I will point out to you, unsolicited, Ruger, somebody over there saw the video that I did on part 1 of this. They actually reached out to me to see if I wanted to send the rifle back to them so they could take a look at it. I appreciate that. One must understand that what you're seeing filmed versus what has actually occurred in the past, and maybe not immediate past, but like a couple of months ago, has already transpired. So there's some stuff that we haven't discussed here in this format yet that has occurred with it that will lead to more discovery along the way. So just know that that is a thing. Thank you to Ruger for reaching out. I do appreciate the concerns that they have expressed. And again, I want to reiterate that while I don't think the rifle is performing to the degree that it should be for what it is, I don't think that when you spend this much on a rifle, you should have to do a whole lot of tweaking just to get it to shooting consistently and goodish groups. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad rifle, and I'm not giving up on it yet. So let's keep the conversation going down below. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.